I want to move the show right along. I had the pleasure of talking to Tim Heidecker, half of Tim and Eric. One of my favorite. They're so funny. Do I have to even say that I'm a fan of Tim and Eric? I'm a huge fan of Tim and Eric. Awesome show, great job. And Tom Goes to the Mayor. And I bought their movie on iTunes. And I've liked him since the Cat Film Festival videos. There. I've proved my fandom to you. I recently saw him in the movie The Comedy. Turns out he's an incredibly great actor. And I had a really nice time talking to him. So here is my conversation with Tim Heidecker. You look so... I love you in this like J. Crew, like sipping a coffee look.
I'm a very clean-cut man. Very conservative sort of...
Gentleman.
My appearance is very conservative.
Tim Heidecker, what a pleasure to have you in my apartment.
Yes, finally.
I know. You've been back and forth a lot, and now you're here promoting The Comedy.
Now I'm here for good.
Are you really?
On your show. You're a permanent guest.
Yes, you're going to be my co-host. How's your laugh? How's your sidekick laugh?
Not good, because I don't find most things that funny.
You're a tough laugh, which I respect, actually. I like that about you. You're the opposite of a slutty laugh. Right. You're somebody who's like
well, hard
to win over. Oh, no, I could tell.
That was a fake laugh, too.
It was thin and not hearty at all.
Right.
I want to ask you about The Comedy, but before I do, I would like to know about going to see Brand X with Russell Brand.
I didn't see it. Well, yes, I did see. I saw Russell Brand with Brand X, but I saw Brand X with Russell Brand.
Yes.
But I didn't go with him because he was hosting the show. We went, I guess, as a dare or as a stunt. I'm very vocally, publicly not a fan on Twitter. And I mean, what do you think of that guy? Are you on the record?
I'm on the record as saying that show is like nothing I'd ever seen in my life. Like I watched the first 5 or 10 minutes of the first episode, and I was just shocked.
Have you seen the new season?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you have to see the new season.
Has it gone backwards?
It's gotten backwards in a weird way because the first season was, kind of just like a UCB theater, black box kind of vibe, which didn't look good, and I thought it was not, it was a bad choice, but at least it was like something original or something different. This season, the only note they took seems to be, let's make the set more traditional. So they've gone sort of more into the middle of the road with the show.
Does he have a desk?
He's got a desk with the coffee cup and the microphone, but it looks like they took, an afternoon daytime talk show set and then littered the background with just like British things. So there's like the Big Ben and, the guard and just random stuff like a dartboard. You got to look at the set for the new season.
I remember
so gross.
From the first season, it looking like he was on the set of Cats, the musical, which was like set in a junkyard, and he seemed to be dressed in garbage, and there was some sort of you stumbled upon an alley, and like this wise homeless man was going to like regale you with some stories and non sequiturs.
Right.
Every once in a while,
come into my alley,
and then I have some visual aids.
Right. So me and some friends have been sort of fans of hating that show, and we got invited. They're desperate for an audience to come. I live in Hollywood, so if you kind of want, you can go to some of these tapings. It's not too hard. So we went, and I went in disguise. I put on a slight disguise because I didn't know whether or not he knew I was, giving him shit for his show. I didn't know anything. And I felt like part of me feels bad for shitting on his show. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm a comedian. I do stuff, and people shit on my show all the time.
Yeah.
People, and I don't like that as a man, as a person.
I was just saying, it's like the fellow comedian thing.
Yeah,
you
it's
have
sort
that
of like an unwritten rule,
yeah.
And some people are like, yeah, you should really kind of, keep in mind that he's just a guy trying to do what he thinks is best.
And therefore just like you.
Right.
You guys are the same man.
Right. But there's something about him that just makes me very upset that he's successful.
And he's very successful.
Very successful. I think you had said this, like America, didn't you say this online somewhere? Like America has sent the message that we are not. interested.
We have a zero to low tolerance policy at Russell Brand at this point, but I guess Barry Diller wants to keep it on because it's on like.
Is it Barry Diller or is it Rupert Murdoch that wants to? Because
maybe it's Rupert Murdoch that he has like it airs on a channel in Britain that he owns or something.
Yeah, it's Rupert Murdoch owns Sky,
right?
And it's there, and it's on FX here. It can't do well. I don't know. I don't know anybody that talks about it as in like, oh, I can't wait for the next Brand X to be on. Or did you like? There's no water cooler moments coming from that show.
No.
What's weird about we could talk about this probably for maybe ever, but so many things like the fact that it's taped. It's a talk show that's taped a week in advance of when it airs. So it's supposed to have this sort of topical, like what's going on in the world today vibe, but he can't really talk about the news in a specific sense because who knows where that news story is going to be the week later that it airs. He alludes to current events. The way he sets up his first segment, he's like, well, this was the week we were there was a week before the election. So he was, well, by next week, you're going to have elected your new king. By the time this airs, you'll have elected your new king. And then he says, it doesn't matter who wins. And I almost just, stood up and walked out.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly, I think, that distills down to like what is horrible about him. He presents sort of this liberal kind of like, but we're all one, and why can't we all just get along? But then he says like, well, it doesn't matter who wins the election. Well, it actually did, And
that's not even the joke. That's like the premise of what he's about to claim as a joke.
Right. So then he sets up like, okay, I'm acknowledging that events are happening that are current, sort of, but since we can't really talk about that because who knows what's going to happen, here are some generic weird stories that happened in the world. It's like woman bites off husband's testicles. And then he does 5 minutes of like the most base, jokes about balls and sex. I feel like
that 5 minutes is just mostly him repeating that headline.
He stands up there and reads the whole story.
Yeah.
And then like puts asides in like, I would hate to be that guy, like just not very thoughtful observations.
No take on it, really.
Okay, so then he brings out, God, there's so much to go through. First of all, it's a half-hour show, which tapes for 2 hours. So if you watch, Letterman, Leno, any of these shows, if you go to a taping, it's more or less as long as the show ends up being. Because you want to give that impression that when you're watching it on TV, it's actually something that,
is happening
in real time. Yeah. This show, they've overwritten it. They let him just go and go and go. And they have clearly way too many segments for the amount of time that the show's going to actually be aired in.
It's almost like if Frank Zappa went into the studio and did his thing for 20 minutes and then they released it as like a 3-minute single.
3-minute song, right. Yeah. When we watch the finished product and it is just a mess. It's sliced and slapped together in a way that doesn't make sense. It doesn't capture whatever that is about him that is appealing to some people. So if I was a fan of Russell Brand's comedy, I wouldn't be a fan of the show because they've just stripped the essence of him.
They clipped his wings, man.
Right, they clipped his wings. So the second segment is a segment called Defend an Indefensible Position.
Right, right. Or I think, or like Indefensible Opinion or, right.
So he brings out this woman who's a advocate for anti-immigration, she's an advocate for, anti-illegal immigration. Deporting. Yeah. So she's a little bit, she's right wing of that issue, on that issue. So he brings out this woman who is in her 60s, overweight, very overweight with and it uses a walker, right? So she comes out and she's meant to be the villain. Like that's how he's positioning her. But everybody in the audience is like, I don't really want to pick on this lady. She has a position, there's a logic to it. She's like, here's what I think, if you're here illegally, then you should be deported. You should have to go through legal means. So there's nobody that's like that upset about that position,
Did you feel like you were encouraged to boo at any point?
Yeah, well, a little bit. And he's like trying to and she's very religious. She has her Bible out there.
Okay.
And Russell's not about that. He does not think that's cool. So he goes, this is the next best moment. He goes, well, she makes her point, and he like leans into her and says, "Yes, but have you ever seen the Milky Way?" I'm gonna do my Russell Brand impression, but it's not good. I'll admit it. Have you ever seen the Milky Way? Have you seen it? It's if you look at it, it's and if you can, there's a little speck, a little tiny speck. That's the Earth. That's the sun, and beyond that, you can't even see the Earth. So who cares what happens on our little planet? Who cares what happens with a little line? And why can't everybody just get along and live wherever they want? And like he sort of slinks into that position, and the audience applauds because okay,
the old Milky Way.
Yeah, where do you follow that logic? Where does that you follow that through? It's like, well, is rape something that people should care about? Like, I don't know. What does that mean?
That's just like saying it doesn't matter who's your new king.
Yeah.
Because of the Milky Way.
Yeah. It's like, it's just it's like a 17-year-old college kid on acid's perspective of the world.
I'm picturing you behind your disguise glasses, like scratching your chin, sort of trying to put that together.
We were fake laughing very loudly. And one thing we're trying to do is incite applause as much as possible. So, like, we would be the first person to clap at anything he said. So,
do you ever try to start a clap along or like a chant?
Yeah, well, we tried to I tried to get the clap in as soon as like the punchline was about to hit its crescendo, so it almost kind of like ruined his joke. So like the show's a mess, and then William Shatner comes out.
Didn't that woman have wasn't there a twist to her story as far as why she didn't like immigrants?
Oh, well, she brings out this picture of her nephew who was murdered by some. Yeah, this is like a comedy show, right? And this woman's like, well, my nephew was murdered by an illegal immigrant. And that's not really, the most fair argument to me. It's like that's very anecdotal or whatever. It's like, okay, bad stuff happens, but the energy in the room just drops, just like gets sucked out because it's like, oh, I feel just bad. Like, how are they going to make this bit work?
They're not. And also, now you understand where she's coming from, whether or not it's logical.
Right.
Like, oh, her nephew was murdered by an illegal immigrant.
Right.
Therefore, that makes sense. It's not an indefensible opinion after all. Right.
And then he's like, oh, here's the bit that their comedy writers came up with. Let's bring out some actual illegal immigrants that they picked up at Home Depot. Yeah. So they bring out these 4 guys, and, Russell he's just slinking around. He can't believe how button pushy this is. And now we've got you. Somehow in his mind, he's like, now we've cornered her. Like, now she has to tell these guys who seem like nice guys that they have to be deported. Oh, well, how she's going to change her mind now, So they bring these guys out, and then they're like, oh, but we want to make sure that they don't get in trouble. So they put masks on them.
Oh
they give these guys
what kind of mask?
Like the Phantom of the Opera mask, wrestling mask, a Nixon mask.
Oh, so they vary it so it's whimsical.
Yeah.
And visually diverse.
But here's the craziest thing. We were all like, this is very demeaning and exploitive, clearly, no question about it. It was just extremely exploitive for these guys who probably did it just because they were offered, whatever, $100.
Yeah.
And he admitted that too. He's like, I paid these guys, blah, blah. What was amazing was when then we watched it a week later, they showed them without the masks on. They showed the whole setup. Yeah.
Why?
They showed the whole, it's like,
because it didn't work.
That bit doesn't make any
sense.
It doesn't make any, it probably didn't cut together without explaining the masks. But at the same time, it's like, well, then you should have blurred their face. Like if your intention for the masks ultimately was to protect their identity.
Right.
Then you just spent about 30, 40 seconds showing them as so it's like your bit doesn't make sense, and it's kind of mean, it's mean.
That's terrible in so many ways. Like just cut the whole segment.
Yeah, just cut the whole segment.
So did you get caught?
Uncomfortable. So I didn't get caught, but the people that I was with knew the people that produced the show. I had worked with them before. One of the guys was sitting right in front of me. At one point he laughed very loud and inappropriately in a sense that it was too late. Like it was like a second too late. That was very disruptive, and everybody turned around, and Russell stopped. And he didn't laugh. I mean, he swears up and down that it was actually a genuine laugh.
That's just how he laughed.
It just was like a, like a weird honky kind of sound. And you could see Russell kind of was disturbed by it. There was a little commercial break. Russell Brand stormed off the stage and is like, where is he? Where is he? Went right to my friend who was sitting directly in front of me and grabbed him by the shoulders. Like, you all right? You all right, mate? You all right? You know, not in a, because he had been joking with other audience people that were being, you know, heckling or, you know, just sort of like
right.
too
his version
engaged.
of crowd work.
His crowd work, right. Which, by the way, is like a lot of the show. It's not great crowd work, and it's also like, it feels very much like he's filling time.
Yeah, and there's like, only half an hour, so how much time does he need to kill?
Why are you killing time? So, and my friend is like shaking because he just like, so he felt very like, oh man, I really didn't mean to disturb the show. It's not my intention. After the show, he went back because he knew people that worked on the show, and he tried to clarify that it wasn't him. So through talking to another producer, he found out that right before the taping began, somebody on the staff showed Russell Brand my tweets because I had tweeted that I was there and, you know, a few pictures of me and stuff. That obviously was not good news for him, or he didn't appreciate that. So when he heard that laugh, I think he thought that was me and went out to confront me. Ended up confronting my friend.
Oh my God.
Coincidentally, I in my costume that I put together, was just glasses and combed my hair differently, it sort of resembled this guy. So,
but they didn't kick you out.
No.
Okay.
And I don't know if he knew who I don't know if
he
knows who I am.
He does. If he stormed off saying, where is he? Where is he?
But I don't know if he knows who I am as like another comedy guy or not.
I imagine that he does.
Yeah, but I think he would confront me in some way.
Maybe he didn't recognize you.
Maybe he didn't recognize me. That was the idea. I'm glad I did the disguise.
We've got to get you on Brand X to promote the comedy.
I was going to ask you like what you thought it meant for me to have people ask me like, why did you do it?
I completely understand why you did it.
I really don't know.
I love diving into things that are completely cringeworthy. I mean, I relate to so much of your work for that reason. Like I grew up with public access and like weird VHS stuff, and I love awkwardness. I've also taught enough like improv that like when people are bad, people are like, oh, how can you handle that? You're like, it's great. It makes life more interesting.
Right. I felt I'm conflicted in my own mind about my obsession with the show and my disrespect for it.
I think you use it in your own work. It's just sort of like somebody who's an artist going to the museum, honestly, and being like, that sucks. I'm going to do something with it. Right.
It's very complicated why it sucks, too. It's not just, it's just not well done. There's just multiple levels of dysfunction and cynicism towards the audience in a way, and sort of disrespect towards television itself.
If you didn't love comedy, you wouldn't be so obsessed with when it doesn't work completely.
That's true.
So I want to ask you about the comedy. I really liked the movie, and I loved your performance in it. I thought you were so good, and I was telling you before, you're a really talented actor.
Thank you.
Who knew? I mean, not to say who knew. That's sort of backhanded.
No, that's fine.
How did you get hooked up with Rick Alverson?
Through a friend, Will Oldham.
Got it.
Billy
Why
can't I sell it? No,
okay.
I can't say his Bonnie Prince Billy.
Got it.
Right.
Body by Billy.
That's his nomenclature. So he wrote me. He had made a movie with Will and asked to put me in touch with. Rick was interested in talking to me and Eric about doing this movie. So we started talking. He called me. We had a long phone call that was very. I was very interested in what he was interested in making. I think he talked originally about a couple different big themes that were interesting to me. Was what about, let's make a movie about guys in their mid-30s that haven't left the life that they were living in their 20s, that are still kind of going to bars and hanging out and not working or working and not really committed to a career. And haven't grown up yet. That was kind of interesting to me. And also the way comedians talk to each other and the way people use comedy and humor as a way to communicate, a way to talk to each other in a veiled sense of irony that sometimes gets very suffocating.
Yeah.
It's very isolating.
Well, what was interesting about that is that nobody in the movie... The characters are comedians. None of them are professionals. None of them really do anything. And yet they reminded me of hipsters that I don't like the word hipster, but it just sort of is apropos for everyone knows what you're talking about.
Right.
But they're people that sort of thought they were funny enough to be comedians in their like social interactions, but would never have the focus or the discipline to actually
Right.
kind of have a career in that world.
That makes sense to me. I mean, a lot of my friends, and not to say that my friends are like these guys necessarily, but a lot of my friends are funnier than some of the comedians I know, and they're because it's just in daily life, in the way we joke around, but they just decided not to. Well, I'm not going to do that as a career, or I don't want to do that as a career, or I want to do something else. So. Yeah, I think there's plenty of people out there that have great,
or the
that are
people
funny guys
in the movie that just are constantly. Your character's just constantly doing bits instead of existing with the fact that his father's dying, and he doesn't really have any direction in his life.
Right.
Do you like your character?
No, I think I don't think you're meant to like him necessarily.
Do you? Did you have to when you were playing him?
No, well, I don't know if I approach things from that angle necessarily, like whether I like him or not. I was just basically being myself and then turning it up to 300% in terms of the nastiness and cruelty. And behaving inappropriately, But in the movie, you're making a movie. You're able to do these things without any consequences because it's a movie.
Did you cringe when you were watching it, like some of the cab scene and?
Yeah, I mean, we knew we wanted to make this character very uncomfortable to watch and going over the line as much as possible. So yeah, that's meant to make you feel uncomfortable.
How is your cringe reflex? Like, are you still able to cringe?
I think I cringe only really at gross stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was watching The Walking Dead on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people watch that or spoiled.
So many people watch that show.
But there was just a gross cesarean scene.
With the baby? Yeah.
I feel like this.
It was like a rusty knife or something?
Yeah, I mean, that
I heard
made
about
me
it.
cringe. I couldn't watch that. But I don't know. I don't think anything from the Christopher Guest world is cringy necessarily anymore. It's very entertaining and fun. But it doesn't make me uncomfortable.
There's a couple of inside jokes in the movie, like casting Jeff Jensen, who I've known for a few. Everybody knows Jeff Jensen. He's not an actor, but if you live in New York,
right?
And you're cool like I am.
Yeah, that's good street cred.
You know that people who are cool talk about being cool and knowing Jeff Jensen. But
he made that great. I mean, I should plug his prank phone calls, Earls and Jensen.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest prank phone call records of all time, in my opinion.
And he's on that, and also Greg
Turkington,
who's Neil Hamburger,
and James Murphy from LCD Sound System, who is the king of Williamsburg, and didn't have to do much to
emulate the character he needed to play. And what was it like hanging out with those guys making the movie? Was it just sort of like a hang? Did you kind of have the life that was? Yeah,
we really tried to create. The Rick, the director, was really smart in filming that. There wasn't a lot of coverage. There wasn't a lot of multiple takes. It was very much set the room up the way we would be, and then get the cameras as far back as possible. Put some nice long lenses on there so you can get these beautiful depth of field shots. And also we would forget that the cameras are rolling after, so there'd be these long 15-minute takes where first 5 minutes would probably be really cringy to watch because it's guys warming up on camera, and probably not feeling very good about it. But after a few minutes, you kind of find a little rhythm and go. And so Rick had all this just raw footage of us hanging out and talking and making fun of each other. And so those scenes were really fun to do. Eventually, at first they were like, "Oh boy, this is it's
we just gotta act like assholes."
9 a.m, and we're supposed to act like we're drinking 40s, and it's like a fun time. And some scenes were set up even more sort of documentary almost in that, just get some people over, just get some beers open and just see where it goes, and then kind of adjust along the way. But that seems like a really efficient way to make movies, and that's what you're going for. And did you have a lot of, I kind of hate this question because it's such a cliche, but did you get to improvise a lot? Did you get to add a lot to the script? Well, we had to add everything to the script. In terms of what came out of our mouths, Rick had written a pretty extensive outline that pretty much laid out what the movie was going to be and where the scenes were and everything. But the dialogue was all improvised, and
that's really interesting because you kind of have to be a less funny version of who you really are when you're making those jokes, you're doing those bits. Like you have to be more of an asshole, but I imagine it would be challenging for you to be like, all right, this has got to be kind of less clever than what I'd usually say as a joke here.
Right. Well, I tried to put it through the prism of like being a little drunk or being a little not, a little soft wit, where it's like you're just kind of stream of consciousness.
Or like trying to shock people, like trying to say like the dirtiest, nastiest things.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Very scatological and very like just buzzwords of whether, well, let's make sure you bring up Hitler here. Or let's make sure you bring up, diarrhea or, eating cum or, just all these things that are kind of meaning. Like I've been talking about this a lot, but words and language are don't have much of an effect on me and people I know. It's like, I just said come to you. It's like, and that there's we're not like, oh my God.
Right. We're not
blushing. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is playing with language and being ironic in being offensive. Like I'm not you can't offend any of my friends. I can't tell my friends anything that's going to like hurt their feelings or make them feel uncomfortable unless I sit down and say, listen, I don't like you and I don't want to know you anymore.
I don't think you're funny.
Right. But I can sit around and talk about like how much piss I drank last night. And it's obvious that I'm joking.
You're in a safe space.
Yeah, and I'm not.
And your character keeps getting these beautiful girls after being like, not particularly funny, not particularly warm.
Right.
I mean, it's just so effortless for him.
Well, yeah, I mean...
which is completely realistic.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's so realistic in that world.
I was at a Q&A, this woman raised her hand, this older woman, who didn't like the movie, didn't get it, just really didn't connect at all, which is fine. But she was like, I don't understand why this director made the biggest Hollywood cliche choice to cast these beautiful women that this guy just gets to sleep with him. I'm like, well, first of all, he cast actors that he wanted to work with. They were attractive, but
he's not McG.
Yeah. He didn't cast like Playboy bunnies,
Olivia Wilde, or
So and then it's like, but that does happen.
It happens constantly in that community. You see the most gorgeous girls in Williamsburg, and their boyfriends either don't have jobs or not particularly nice, or they're not particularly attractive. Or no, you're right. It's completely realistic. The title, the comedy, I mean, I don't want to be like, what does it mean?
Right.
You didn't make it, and I don't like
I can
people,
say that.
What are your thoughts on the title?
Yeah, I think it works for me on a few different levels. One, it does work on sort of an ironic. It's a joke. It's the comedy. It's not a comedy. Like that's immediately just a joke that I think is a good joke and fun. And there's not a movie called The Comedy, so let's use that.
It is a great title.
And also, but I think the movie is about comedy and humor, and the way humor is used as humor and irony
like
is used as a defensive mechanism and as a weapon. And so I think it's not a complete disconnection from the word. And so I think it's fair to use it.
And Tim, you're doing a screening at BAM this weekend?
I am doing a screening at BAM.
Are you doing a Q&A after?
Friday and Saturday. The Q&A isn't at 6:50. There's
it's
a screening
after the 6:50 screening on Saturday.
Right. I love a Q&A.
They're so awkward, aren't they?
I could go forever.
Yeah.
They're not awkward. Sometimes they are. I love being kind of a jerk at the Q&A, because sometimes some people have good questions, but a lot of times people ask questions just to hear themselves talk.
Or like they won't be questions.
Or they'll just be like, I just want to tell you my opinion about this one thing. Which is fine, but I will not make it easy for somebody that just has,
Well, that's a great selling point. So come to the Q&A.
It'll be more cringy than the movie. But no, in the case of the Q&As for the comedy, I try to be a little bit of a softer. I try to be soft.
Well, it's
because
also
I want to be like, listen, that guy that you just saw, that's not exactly me.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. Good luck with the movie. It's called The Comedy. I really liked it, and you were fabulous in it.
Thank you.